To kick off today with our keynote discussion with Nick Fairburn, if you've been watching a lot of advertiser-supported streaming TV lately, like I have, you may recognize our keynote speaker. I've known Nick Fairburn, the CMO of Gabi, since his days at Dollar Shave Club, and he's been with us several times over the years. But a couple of weeks ago, I was watching one of my streaming services on my big OLED, and who appears but Nick Fairburn? And I scream out to my wife, I know that guy. As Nick is about to tell us, his appearing in his brand's own ads was part of a brand building and pivot campaign with many lessons for other brands, old and new. And interviewing Nick today, we have our own Sarah Mahoney, who's longtime editor and reporter here at MediaPost and many other trade pubs. I think Nick is out on the West Coast, and Sarah, if you're in here, I think you're as far east as you can go. You're up in Maine.
I am down East Maine.
I'm gonna let you get started. There's Nick. I recognize that guy from TV.
Hey, I'm Nick. We created Gabi. Just kidding.
I'm gonna let you guys take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for that intro, Steve. And good morning, Nick. You know, he just queued us right up for that.
Right.
I have seen lots of CEOs appear in ads and not very many CMOs. I had the same reaction when I saw you on Hulu. Maybe we could make that be our first question. How did that happen? And how does it feel to be a star?
Well, what Steve didn't mention is that they saw another startup that he's familiar with, and his wife said, I don't really like that insurance commercial. And I told Steve it's an insurance commercial. I get it, right? So we are a 5-year-old startup insurance shopping marketplace. And our founder was in our television ads, and it's been a key vehicle for us to grow in our D2C space over the past 2 years. It's like 40%, 50% of our overall marketing mix between OTT and TV. My founder and CEO is an amazing man that I work for. His name's Hanno Fitchner, and he's from Germany with a very thick German accent. And he's very excited about saving you money on your insurance, right? So it's the very traditional kind of Series B, Series C startup, kind of, you know, tell them why you founded the company, tell them why they should come to your website and use your service or your product. Well, after about a year, that thing really ripped, and we saw amazing return on ad spend after about a year of incessant frequency. And then the pandemic hits, and we get really, really cheap television prices. And so our frequency picks up because we're buying scattered. I start to get hate mail. And they start to, you know, so the German guy yelling at you about your car insurance is disruptive in a good way to get your attention. But after about exposure 8, you're like, okay, dude, stop yelling at me. So after, you know, a sea of inbound, and as we started to spread mass, we started to get some negative feedback, but it also started to help me realize that's why Geico and Progressive and all these other guys have 6 different campaigns on it at a given time. Maybe it's because the frequency is so high and they don't want to kind of poke it too much with the same message. So we had produced some really beautiful stuff, very expensive, very thoughtful DR, and it didn't work. And so we kept running Hanno. And finally I said, Hanno, can we at least just reshoot your spot with a native English speaking person, just, you know, so it can spread mass. I think we need, you know, an approachable 40-something person, you know, not in great shape. And he looked at me in his German accent and said, yeah, you. And I said, oh gosh, I don't want to be on TV. I totally want to be on TV. No, I didn't want to be on TV. It was a COVID moment. We couldn't get an actor. It was right in the height of the lockdown. So we did a COVID production where I did my own makeup. I spent $12,000, created that ad. That is why I am the CMO in the ad. It was a fast pandemic solution, same exact script and everything. And I'm happy to report that I beat him by 30% in performance. But after my incessant frequency, we're now running at 50-50 and we're about equal. And I have some more brand response ads in the mix to kind of lighten the load and kind of make people smile beyond just us telling you to go change your insurance. Oh, you're muted, Sarah.
I'm so sorry. First call this morning. Thanks so much for explaining that. And that kind of set us up nicely for, you were not initially a fan of OTT, and you have kind of come around, your thinking's changed on that. Maybe you can talk to us about Hulu and other places and what you're thinking now.
Yeah. Gosh. It's been a roller coaster if anyone has been working with television and OTT over the past 18 to 24 months from a performance perspective, right? Viewership and pricing and all of that such. One of my first jobs, I was an ad agency guy. I was a media buyer at Media Edge, and then I went to OMD. So I was a big agency holding company media buyer, used Donovan data systems and inputted my buys. So I'm a TV guy at heart before I grew into kind of a marketer and such. So for me, I always understood and still understand the power of the reach of traditional television. And so much as the last 5-10 years, we've seen a lot of acceleration into streaming platforms. TV still has the reach, right? But what we found over the pandemic is TV is losing some of its reach, right? And viewership is going down. I think we were able to reap the benefits of really increased viewership. We all sat at home for a year and a half, and I had CNBC on all day while I was working, right, on mute. And sometimes I'd watch my Today Show and all that kind of stuff. As the pandemic started to morph and change and people started getting vaccines, we saw dramatic viewership drops in linear. Also, post-election viewerships dropped quite a bit. I was 20-30% on Fox News and CNN. So both sides of the story kind of, and it was working really well. All of the sudden, as the vaccines go out, the viewership drops, but the rates hold because the world starts opening up. Advertisers start coming back. iOS 14 happens. So Facebook advertisers are going, oh gosh, where can I put dollars? Not here because of this mess that's going on. TV becomes more and more impacted. As the viewership is declining, but there's upfronts with the general market, these TV networks need to make good on these upfronts. And so the scatter inventory for me is getting less and less and more expensive, right? So there's kind of a negative force happening in two senses. One, less people viewing and the rates aren't getting any cheaper, right? So two forces that hurt me. So I said to myself, well, I really should jump on the OTT train. And I've tried it in the past at different companies and at this company, and the cost PERS and the way I measure it had always been a challenge. It always seems to be 30 to 50% less efficient. And it was a challenge for me, but as all of this stuff happened that I just went through, I said to myself, I have to diversify, right? Even with my remnant television buying strategy scatter in cable, I have local nationals, and I have 50 networks. I'm still not clearing what I need to based on the pricing I need to hit my cost PERS. So I started testing into OTT, and it really turned out was like, I just didn't have the measurement right. And I had been biased because of online video and because of the walled gardens of YouTube and Facebook that I never really solved video at scale like I did TV in my career. And so I kind of put OTT in a timeout in my mind, thinking it's just like online video. It's crazy reach, but it's not as quantifiable. There's fraud, impressions, right? All this kind of stuff. So I started testing. And now, I went from 0% to 20% of my spend, television spend, to 60% of my television spend. And the journey came through testing. So basically what I found is OTT is just like regular TV, but it's also just like Facebook, right? And so it's like my two worlds started to collide. But what I thought was, okay, cool. OTT is just like a place, right? In streaming, right? Where when I'm managing my TV, it's got to be this network, this day part. Let's look at performance. I thought OTT was just throw the money on Hulu, right? And it'll clear, and that's how Hulu performs. But what I realized is, now that I have 30 some different streaming networks between, platforms and then providers and then networks, I've got Pluto, I've got NBC, I've got Hulu, I've got Fox, I've got DirecTV streaming, I've got Comcast, I've got CBS Entertainment. I could keep going and going. It started working. And my hypothesis and what I'm finding in the data over the last 6 months is, when television and the way you buy it in a remnant or scattered fashion, there's a implied CPM, right? But viewership is not guaranteed, right? And pricing has not still right-sized based on the viewership for a performance marketer like me. Guess what you can do in streaming? It's a guaranteed impression, right? It's not guaranteed to run, but I know I paid a $10 CPM because they can only charge me, based on the impressions that were served. So I started growing there and started adding networks and doing your traditional kind of test approach. And I started treating it like television, but measuring it like a digital channel and having pretty strict attribution, bringing in windows of view windows. And a traditional digital marketer goes, oh, view windows, you get a mess with attribution. But it started working. I started shortening the view windows and did a little bit of regression to really back into kind of understanding its role. So I just talked a ton. I do want to share a little bit about how we manage OTT and what I've found about it. Do you want me to keep going, Sarah? Do you want me to pause and you want to ask?
Yeah, I do. And also, I think somebody just asked a question, which I'll throw in there, which is how are you seeing OTT remarketing or search remarketing ROI rather than just OTT as a standalone? which I
Yeah.
suspect you were going to touch on anyway. That's good.
Killer question. I use a data analytics cloud of Amplitude and Looker, and I pipe in last click UTMs and I look at things and I combine television and organic. And that's not fair because that's streaming, that's linear, and that's all things organic. But I have like a multiplier approach to pull things apart. What my team and I have recently done is actually taken brand search and lumped it in and then associated different parts of organic to different buckets of offline channels like podcast and TV to try to get a harder look at what our TV CPA is. And it's starting to work and it's starting to help me get clarity. As it relates to OTT remarketing, absolutely. I'd say it is probably about 20% more efficient when I do remarketing on the OTT side after I know someone was exposed either to a competitor ad or has been to my site. So, we do the traditional upload the file and kind of go find the people like these people. And then search remarketing, I'd say is okay, but I kind of bucket it all together and don't necessarily pick it apart. I could go in and take a look, but generally, good question. That said, when I started OTT and, I consult a bunch of brands on television, I would measure it solo independent and get it on its wheels first, and then start adding the juice on top of it. Think of it like television. It's a top mid funnel channel, but you can measure it like a bottom funnel channel. So you just have to understand its role and use those other channels like search remarketing to capture that demand if it's not going to come organically.
Okay, great. And just, you mentioned competitive space, and I think a lot of people here are in categories that have just exploded with new competition, either from startups or from legacy companies that are getting into it. Car insurance is so crazy competitive right now. How do you use your classical marketing training to differentiate what in a lot of ways is a parody brand?
Yeah, it's interesting. I learned a lot around disruption from my boss at Dollar Shave Club. I was one of the early marketers there. I went in a performance marketer and he trained me. He was from Procter & Gamble and he was a really brilliant brand thinker. And he taught me about like the brand boot camp of like, what's the one thing, right? And, also I've said this at previous summits with Steve and team around kind of this very simple formula of problem, solution, and truth. Right? So like, what's the tension in the category that you can hit on? And for me, it's easy. The last 10 years of my career, I've been jumping to mission-based disruption startups, right? Where it's all about how do I disrupt on behalf of the consumer? And so as a marketer, I look for that so I can find the tension and can poke at it. In my category, I'll tell you candidly, I don't think I've solved it yet. I think my product solves the problem, but I don't know if I've clearly articulated it yet, right? What we do is we're the one place for real rates that you can actually buy and compare your insurance. But every company, whether it be a marketplace, a platform, or a carrier says, switch and saves, you're overpaying, we can save you money, right? And the problem is the category is so focused on savings, and consumers ourselves, the first thing we think about with our car insurance is savings, no matter what segment you're in from an economic standpoint. So knowing that's table stakes, finding your way in, I've started to differentiate and it's starting to work. But I'd say to most consumers, all seems the same.
Yeah. So what's your sort of I know you advise a lot of companies too. What's your sort of basic? Let's get started about how to differentiate you and what you do.
Yeah,
I mean, get to the one thing, one thing.
I mean, it's like not a sexy process, but it's fun. And a lot of people have their own way to do it, but I talk to customers. And typically when I find a company, candidly, I make sure there's some product market fit. So I know there's something there before I get there, right? They've got a little bit of a track record of at least a couple $1 million of ARR, but really talking to customers and understanding. For instance, there's a company that I'm friends with that's a startup doing renewable energy and kind of a new energy approach in Texas. And they were talking to me about renewable. And I said, well, wait a minute, what are you solving? And they said, well, the big insurance companies don't give you transparency and they overcharge you. And we do it through renewable. And I said, well, have you talked to your customers? What do they care about? Well, they're overpaying and they don't like the man. I was like, oh, it sounds like a David and Goliath Dollar Shave Club story. It sounds like your resonant messaging. So they went and talked to customers and guess what? renewable was a nice secondary thread line of how you deliver that, but it wasn't the lead message. So that was a long-winded way of saying talking to some customers and then doing your traditional kind of landing page testing, message testing. Even though Facebook has been tough for all of us lately, it's still a wonderful testing, rapid prototyping platform, as well as, you know, the traditional kind of homepage, landing page copy tests and that kind of stuff. And television and OTT, like they are now. You heard me talk about the "Hey, I'm Nick" ad that some of you have seen incessantly on Hulu. That costs $12,000 to $15,000 to make. It's not very cost prohibitive. So you could actually pump out a couple versions of your message and see what response looks like. And not just kind of visits, but like take it through full funnel, right? Because some messages might actually get you a lot of fake demand that doesn't convert, right? And sometimes less click-through rate or demand might be the right demand. Is kind of how I think about it.
I'm so curious because I know you've told me that when you first started, you spoke to many customers. Can you maybe just share one or two things that you were wrong about that surprised you that you sort of had to rethink after talking to a customer?
Yeah, gosh, which company and when? I'm wrong probably 80% of the time, right? And I think that's one good chip for all of us to walk away with, right? Agility is something that you've always got to keep, and don't ever get comfortable because the world always changes. I think for me, when I was starting the Gabi journey, I thought a lot about trying to solve everything for everyone. We are all about access and transparency of rates for the right coverage you need on your car insurance. And I had this assumption that the total addressable market is huge, which it is. But then I started realizing, and I was kind of hating on some of my competitors that created these like click advertising marketplaces, right? That say hey, compare your insurance, and you fill out a funnel and you go back to a page that has a bunch of brands, but there's no actual quotes, and you have to go and do it again, right? And I used to just say, that's so wrong, right? We need to provide real quotes for everyone all the time. But guess what I found out? 20% of the market doesn't give a crap, right? Just give me that, I've been trained and I'm okay with that click arbitrage game, and leave me alone, right? And don't try to be something to me that I don't need you to be. So wow, that helped. But guess what? As I did some segmentation, I learned those were the lowest value LTV customers. And so I said, okay, wow, why don't I create a lead gen type of experience, but do it in more of a traditional brand approach and being transparent like my disruptor routes. So instead of saying, enter in all your info and we'll give you wonderful rates, to that segment of the market that says to me, I don't have insurance, we say, hey, Gabi's for people with insurance to bring their policy and compare and see if they're getting the best price, or if we could find them a better price for the same exact coverage. We have a bunch of other partners outside of our network that can get you insurance that you have to go to their websites. After 6 months, come back and bring that policy and see if we can save you some money. The difference there was just like the transparency of what we're doing versus the category that I, hated on, of just saying, we'll help you compare the one place when there's not really stuff there. And it looks like there might be one or two quick questions. I think one question from John around how I'm buying CTV. And is it about direct pubs or exchanges? I'm doing both, right? I have some exchanges and I have some pub directs, and I'm actually working with an agency partner. Here's what I found. I want it to be all programmatic. I want it to be exchange driven. It's still relationships. And I want it to evolve, but we're not there yet. And I teach some of the people on my team, like, relationships still matter. Phone calls, do you remember how those work? Look, sometimes I can get preferential treatment. Like during the election, I got preferential treatment on some networks based on some relationships and right. And I'm sure all of us have stories like that. So candidly, we have direct relationships with Disney, Fox, NBC as we buy their OTT. And then we have some kind of exchange-based pubs that we're kind of buying through a PMP and some exchanges.
Okay, great. And then finally, I know we wanted to talk about, if you could, you've been doing some pivoting, and you and Steve have had some talks about what that's like to go from B2B to D2C, and how does it feel? How have you done it? And what advice do you have for others?
Yeah, I think, look, I have been a D2C marketer my whole career, really last 10 years, Pro Flowers, Dollar Shave Club, Latota clothing platform. Now this, I'd say, like I was saying earlier, the only, this is for a certain type of person, kind of early stage startup, growth and all of that kind of stuff. on the pandemic, I got really excited that our growth 8x'd, right? We 8x'd our business in 12 months, right? And I was like, oh, great job, Nick. Guess what? Like I had some tailwinds, right? And I got fat and comfortable. And normally the way I run my career is like curious, always learning, never get comfortable. And that's what I've learned, right? Television stopped working and it was my lead channel. When your lead channel is 60% less efficient and you're a venture-backed company that has a board of directors and fundraising, there's a problem, right? And so I think a couple pieces of advice is the very, very basic recommendation is diversify. Don't have a dependency too much on one place. We all had Facebook the last 10 years. Now it's TV for me. So just, always test, even if you feel comfortable and you have great performance, and test again and again. It took me 3 times to make native work. It took me 4 times to make direct mail work, right? So remember all the variables between creative and media and price and targeting. Don't give up. So for me, we did a bit of a pivot on the partnership side to B2B2C. And for me, it was before calling all these different finance websites and car sales websites and saying, hey, you want to sell insurance, to your users, I'll give you a bounty. But instead, we cracked a plan to say, hey, what if we could embed an insurance brokerage within your experience and brand it? And what if we could kind of almost completely cut the funnel in half by leveraging your first party data? And what if we could show real rates within your experience? SoFi, it's one of my partners. And what if we, instead of paid you a bounty, just split the lifetime value, our 6-year lifetime value of this customer that's super sticky for us and super valuable. And so for me, as you think about TV's not working, I got to fix that, Facebook's not working, I kind of created this like pendulum of when the media market is right and I can lean into it, grow with media. But now I have this B2B2C distribution, which is different. And it's a new for me to learn how to do biz dev and all that. And it's been really fun to flex a new muscle and learn, but also I can lean there when the media market is tough and say, hey, let's distribute more here, where I simply split the LTV and I don't have upfront capital costs, but found a different way to compete within the same exact partnerships with same people I was talking to for 2 years and saying, I'll pay $20 per quote, right? Instead saying, let's change the discussion completely. So that's just an example of, me and my team and all of us challenging ourselves to say, media is not our moat, right? It's not a differentiator, and distribution is super hard in car insurance, right? So that was just an example of me saying, I got too fat and comfortable. And mind you, my media team, we're still flipping up TikTok. We're trying every new streaming channel we can. We're assuming this media mix is our only thing and this other thing's not happening. So it's like a nice way to kind of hold yourself accountable across the board.
I love that. I love that idea of constant learning. And that always makes me want to ask, if there was something that you really wish you learned 2 years ago, that you knew in going into this incredibly disruptive time that would have changed everything, what would it be?
Oh God.
Besides how to make sourdough bread.
Yeah. Don't go into insurance marketing. No, I'm kidding. I'd say, honestly, be more like, this is so hokey because of the theme of the conference and what I talked about, but like be more open to OTT and progressive media that's moving forward, and be an early adopter. When I was at Dollar Shave, I was one of the first Snapchat advertisers, and it was a real thing for us at Dollar Shave. I'm behind the 8 ball in OTT. I'm just launching TikTok. So I think it's a silly, simple answer, but the answer is like, go back to my roots and get uncomfortable and be progressive and assume the ball will drop before it drops and have contingency plans. I know that's so tactical and not sexy, but it's real.
No, that's okay. And again, I know you work with Manly and some other brands. How about, is there a category that you, in hindsight, said, whoa, I wish I had been there, or I wish somebody would do this, or you see gaps in the market better than most people, I think.
Every day there's like, oh, I should start that, or I should go do this. And so I don't really know, to be frank with you. I don't know.
Well, let me jump in there, Sarah.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions that people are asking. Well, one from David is saying, how significant do you see the fraud in CTV?
That's a great question. We don't have a fraud problem, but I put that on my agency and kind of the way that they ingest and they check and all of that stuff. So I candidly use a performance-based agency that kind of started in streaming. And so kind of fraud blocking and detecting and attribution and measurement and working with getting all the logs in. is all pretty seamless with them. So candidly, not a huge issue because they kind of have stuff in place to not let it be an issue.
Okay, and now Steve Smith has a question for you. Do you partner exclusively in different categories, or are some of your partners competing with one another?
I was waiting for a Steve Smith question. There's always a Steve Smith question,
Yeah, just
right?
throw it out there.
For me, because this product we came up with 6 months ago, I kind of did like a spray it and pray it, right? I'm like, I bet auto refi would be great for this. The product that I talked about birthed from the Carvana relationship we have. If you guys know Carvana, we are, a big percentage of their post-purchase traffic. When somebody, buys a car, there's a checklist and you've got to get insurance before they ship the car to you. And so we started working with them, and it's been 2 years where we're passing car and driver and pre-filling the funnel and just really getting it smarter. And our 5% conversion rate turned into a 30% conversion rate. And we're like, wait a minute. We should take this thing out, right? This is the B2B2C thing, right? And so SoFi was our next partner, right? And so that's kind of banking, finance, but we're also getting nested in some of their lending and different parts of their platform. So long-winded answer, Steve, of saying, I am attacking a couple different verticals between fintech and kind of, let me think of it this way from the consumer lens. Let's stop trying to bring insurance people to an insurance website. Right? Who wants to go to an insurance website? Instead, can we bring insurance and savings to the moments that matter? Whether it be managing my financial wellness, managing my finances, purchasing something, a moment that matter. So, think of auto refi, think of mortgage origination, think of any logged in finance neobank or finance app like the Truebills and the Trims of the world. And I am starting to run into that, right? Where I'm working in some of the credit monitoring space, and I've got 3 different people, and one saying, you can't work with that one if you work with this one, and will you work with me? And I've never had to deal with this because I'm new to biz dev. And all of them want exclusivity. But my board of directors says exclusivity needs to be bought. And so kind of I'm thinking of it that way. But hopefully that answers your question, Steve.
I'm sure he'd have a follow-up if you were here. Well, Nick, thank you so much. That was great as always. And Sarah, really appreciate you holding out